Get with me. I deal with reality. Loosen your mind to the truth and don't get mad at me. No politician can give you peace. If you trust Jesus, why do you vote for a beast? Emancipation is long overdue, so it becomes procrastination, because freedom is within you. For some reason we think we're free, so we'll never be, because we haven't recognized slavery. You still a slave, look at how you behave, debating on where and when and how and what master gave.
Hello everyone, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, a weekly show about authoritarianism, government overreach, and global injustice. I am your host Conrad Broges, reminding you that if tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there's someone in the street keeping it at bay. And this will be episode 8 already of This Week in Tyranny. And this week, I've been meaning to make an episode that's more focused on us being the tyrant, the concept of us, the people, not some external power, the police, the government, the social engineers doing all this, because I hear myself sounding similar a couple weeks in a row, and I wanted to switch it up. But of course, this podcast, this show, is not just about what I want to do. I'm responding to the tyranny that's going on in the world. And this week, the events of this week actually confirmed this and locked me into this direction where I could talk more about us being the tyrants. And unfortunately, it's as a result of the recent mass shootings that took place in California, Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay. Within the past week, we've had mass killings. And when mass killings happen, mass shootings, I mentioned this before, that a couple of things come up right away. One is gun control, and I'll speak a lot about that. Another thing is there's a lot of talk about, it's a tough topic because of the restrictive censorship going on, the so-called community guidelines. You are even risking your channel when you bring up words like hoax and false flag. And unfortunately, there's a lot of talk about these things whenever a mass shooting happens. But even more so, I wanted to mention that, and I will not censor myself. We will give you the news with no filter. And I wanted to talk about the problem, because this is a very negative thing, that there's a group of people who are well-meaning, who want to talk about freedom, who see the gun control agenda. This happens and instantly they're going to say false flag or this is a hoax. And that's a problem, because more so, even the biggest problem is that regardless of who carries out a particular shooting, whether it was Adam Lanza, a young kid, or a child, or somebody that's older, or here it's older individuals, whether their shootings are racially motivated or some other poisonous ideologies, whether they're on psychotropic medication, right? Whether they're on SSRIs, as of course there's a big history of these mass shooters being on Prozac and all these different medications. That's a whole another issue. But regardless, the problem is that there are people among us that carry these shootings out. And regardless of what the roots are or what the specifics are of a particular shooting, the person behind the gun who pulled the trigger is somebody who's willing and ready to carry out these acts. And this is the whole reason we are in tyranny, is because there are people among us within our population that are doing these immoral acts. And what happens now is the politicians and the controllers, the social engineers and dark occultists who are controlling the direction of the world, they're going to use it to their agenda. And the number one agenda is, of course, the gun control agenda, disarming the population. And this is why ultimately tyranny has to be addressed from the inside out. First, the tyranny of the self through destructive habits. This is where my first presentation I made, Dependence on Systems of Control, and then the next one about human nature. This is the whole reason I made this channel, Truth and Law, to talk about the tyranny of the self, first of all. because finger pointing and blaming is not solution oriented. So we've got to transform the tyranny of the self, of our own habits, and our own self oppression and self repression. And then the tyranny through family and the community, being a dominator and an oppressor of the people around you, your partner, your girlfriend, your children, your family. And then there's the tyranny at large in the world, which is what we've been talking about: the police, the different control systems, money, the Ponzi schemes of government and its inherent illegitimacy. But the exception to that is when there's an ongoing act of violence. So what I mean by that is, when there's tyranny going on, first we should try to get at the causal factors, the root factors, which is always going to be internal, changing our hearts and our minds, the moral principles behind it all. But when there's an ongoing act of violence, that's when it's not time to change it from the inside out. That's when you address the most immediate threat. And I'll just get right to the point. What I'm talking about is, such as when these mass shootings happen, first, these people had the right to put an end to that right when it happened. What I mean by that is self-defense. And this is, if we're going to talk about gun control, well, let's talk about the self-defense principle, that the only real solution to these mass killings and all kinds of genocide and to taking of life indiscriminately, the only way to prevent that is to have the same tools as the attacker and to be the first to the draw. And I know that's not nice, that's not neat. It doesn't appeal to our sense of security, I know. But this is the only solution we have at this time, until as a society, as a whole species and human family, we can progress further to not do these things to each other. But it's the same way. What after that's addressed, so that happened. Unfortunately, even if the people were armed, you can't prevent every tragedy and every death, every murder. So these murders occurred, they went down, but there's still an ongoing act of violence going on right now. So let's address that. What is the ongoing act of violence? It is when the agents of the state are acting on this. It's a reactionary act on emotion, reacting to emotion, trying to implement gun bans and gun grabs through executive orders and laws and so forth, and state propaganda. And I say violence because a lot of people don't think of that as violence, but the word violence comes from violation, the violation of rights. So we have an ongoing act of violence right now, and it is the attempt to disarm us, which will then open us up to more mass killings and more genocide until more and more freedoms are taken away. Okay? And we also have the right to put down the offender, just like those people, had they have been armed, had a right to put down the mass shooter. So I'm drawing the parallel that these people who are attempting to take our natural God-given right to not only self-defense, but the freedom to, the right to not have our earnings taken away. Yes, I'm talking about taxes. Yes, I'm talking about the right to take any substance you want into your body. So we're talking about drugs, right? So not everybody is going to like that, but anarchism is the only moral position. So I just want to make it clear that we have a right to put down the offender because we are not the ones hurting anybody or violating any rights. So violence is being done to us, right? To me, to my people. And just as a personal rule, I don't believe anything authority figures say. So when a mass shooting happens, I don't assume anything they say is true. But therefore, I don't automatically deny things occur. And this is a problem within the conspiracy-oriented, freedom-oriented people. Sometimes there's this outright denial when we see an event occurring, similar like to the pandemic, where we could see the agenda, how it's going to be implemented, but we make the mistake of denying things that happen without any proof, right? But so, for example, like if somebody tells me that they've been the victim of a crime or tragedy, like they see me on the street and they yell, they tell me, "Oh, somebody's after me, so somebody's chasing me," I'm going to believe them, right? I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then what I'm going to do is ask them some questions. I'm going to try to get to the bottom, to convert that belief, that faith that they're telling the truth, into knowledge. And most of all, I'm going to ask how I can help them. Okay, what can I do? So I think we should apply that, how we would act to another individual. That's how we should act collectively. So when these things happen, I'm thinking the same thing. Mass shooting happened. First is we have to address the humanity and tragedy of it. And this is what the information age makes difficult, because things happen so fast. We forget to stop and say, a tragedy happened here. Let's have respect for the person. Let's have respect for the family of the people that were killed. We just go instantly to the rhetoric and the agendas, right? And bouncing off of that, I really wanted to dedicate this episode just to the victims of violence, and just really talk about more the compassion, the empathy, the respect. But I couldn't. Why? Because the tyrants immediately started to use this to push their agendas and ram them through. And they're following an act of violence with a much bigger act of violence that's ultimately going to result in much more death, very unfortunately. And it shouldn't overshadow a tragedy and loss of life, a complete injustice, but it does. And they don't even wait anymore. They don't even wait to pay their respects. Somebody writes out a tweet for them, bounces it out, say the president or the governor of whatever state it happened, and then they go right to, we got to take away the guns. We must stop this. How many more? How many more? And this is just so disrespectful and so lacking of humanity and dignity. And I just wanted to, I'll jump in and tell this story. I watch football, and the other week I was watching football. By the way, I watch football because for one, I like the sport, and second, it's such a metaphor and full of allegories for life. So some people are going to say I waste my time watching football doing this and that, but there's beauty in art, okay? So I'm watching beauty, I'm watching art happen, people taking a great risk to perform a work of art. And I'm watching a football game between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals, and as I think many of you will know, a player collapsed, right? He took a hit, got up, fell back down, and you see people collapse on the field. Some injuries are worse than others, but this one, he's still down there, and you could see over time that something's really wrong with him. And it got to the point where we thought we just saw somebody die, like right in front of our eyes. Or he had a cardiac arrest, was resuscitated on the field, then taken to the hospital, ambulance on the field. So then they're waiting, and usually in football what happens is, no matter what happens, if there's any kind of weather conditions, any kind of injuries, neck injuries, possible paralysis, the game goes on. It's a real show must go on type of sport, football especially. But in this case, they went to the people in the studio, and there was immediately a sense, led by the former players, it was like, no, they didn't even mention getting on with the game. It was just respect for the individual. And me, who was thinking in my head, well, they're gonna get the game going, right? That was like a humbling experience for me, from those people. Really just focusing on the individual. And the next day goes on, and the next day goes on. Turns out over time he got better. He's recovering. But we think back to that moment, and it was really the right thing to do, the way they acted, to just give it some time and not jump forward. It's not the show must go on. There's a moment of respect here for the people involved, for his family, for what we thought was the loss of life. So that just really showed me, and I saw this happen, with my own eyes. It showed me that was really the right thing to do, and how important that is, and how that has value over time. because life goes on. Of course, tragedies happen all the time, but that moment, there was a bond formed there. That was a real triumph of humanity over the ego, over, thinking about the next thing, always the next thing, the next thing. That was a real solid, dignified, a real true moral way to act right there. And let me take that back to what's going on now. You have mass shootings happen, and as soon as they happen, the press team sends out a tweet, and they immediately start activating for the taking of my God-given natural right for self-defense. And for me to even talk about a topic like this, I've already risked my channel by using the words that I used at the beginning, because of the strict community guidelines. And just when I want to pay my respects to the victims, just if the algorithm were to pick up those words I used, I could get my channel struck. I could get a strike right there and get my channel taken off, just if they misconstrue it through their automated censorship system. And my whole channel could get shut down when I'm talking about helping people and preventing these things. Actually preventing massacres and genocides by dealing with the moral principles behind it and exposing how government is at the root of almost all genocides in recorded history. It always has to do with government. It always has to do with some kind of people who are trained in killing, right? Armed forces. And as opposed to people who just want to take away more of the people's guns, more of their ability to defend themselves, thus making them more susceptible to be victims in the future. And it's really so upside down. And if that happens, if I get taken down, so be it. I'm not going to get censored. I will speak the truth because it is the truth. And I do this at a risk of personal harm doing stuff like this. Biden was quoted saying, "The idea that we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no social redeeming value. Zero. None. Not a single solitary rationale for it." This is what he said. And I will address the word allow. He talks about allow. But first, I wanted to say this, and this is something someone said that I remember. They asked him, "Why do you have 50 battle rifles?" Apparently he had 50 automatic rifles at his home, and the court told him, "Why would you ever need 50 rifles? There's no rationale for it, right?" Like Joe Biden said. And his answer was to hand out 49, right? So that's what I'm talking about. We are talking about something different. There's no rationale for me to have power tools in my bedroom by my bed, because I'm not going to be doing any excavation or demolition by my bed. But don't get it twisted. These battle rifles are there, these semi-automatic weapons are there to protect us from genocide, when orders will be given out by a corrupt government, which I'm not saying our current government would do it, but they can go corrupt overnight. And anybody with even a loose grasp on history knows this, just in the last 100 years. But regardless, the point is not even to have to justify owning guns. We can own whatever we want. But let me read a statement from President Joe Biden on the key gun safety bills. "When I signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first significant piece of gun safety legislation in nearly 30 years, I said there was still work to be done to keep our communities safe and keep dangerous firearms out of dangerous hands. In the short time since, communities across America have been struck by tragedy after tragedy, including mass shootings from Colorado Springs to Monterey Park, and daily acts of gun violence that do not make national headlines." He continues, "Today, Senator Feinstein, with whom I have worked to pass the last assault weapons ban in 1994, has once again introduced an assault weapons and high-capacity magazine ban in the Senate, as well as the legislation raising the age to purchase them to 21. These measures have been co-sponsored by Senators Murphy, Blumenthal, and others. In the 10 years that the assault weapons ban was on the books, mass shootings went down. After Republicans let the law expire in 2004 and those weapons were allowed to be sold again, mass shootings tripled. He continues, I urge both chambers of Congress to act quickly and deliver this assault weapons ban to my desk. Really, this is the part I wanted to read. Quote, the majority of American people agree that with this common sense action, there can be no greater responsibility than to do all we can to ensure the safety of our children, our communities, and our nation. The responsibility to our children, communities, and our nation. So, he mentions that the mass shootings went up when the assault weapons ban was allowed to expire in 2004, and I could address the reasons why the mass shootings increased. But regardless, even if they do increase, it does not change the moral foundation that is absolutely rock solid upon which the right to possess firearms is based. But really, let's just call it what it is. Senator Feinstein, who brought this assault weapons ban back up now, you are less than nothing. You are less than nothing, less than a human being. You are less than nothing. Joe Biden, same thing, less than nothing to me. You received the breath of life from the creator of the universe, right? The priceless gift of free will, and you throw it away, sold it out to serve a totalitarian satanic agenda. Therefore, you are in a state of debt to the universe. You are in a negative, because the dictates you spew are all based on false reasoning, completely false reasoning when it comes to firearms. So consider this a fact check. Let me just fact check them. You are mistaken, to Joe Biden and Senator Feinstein and anybody that thinks that they can do this and thinks they're going to get away with taking Americans' guns, because it doesn't matter that you've done it everywhere else in the world. The cat is out of the bag, and we're not going back in the bag. And I said I'd address the word allow. He said he doesn't know why we allow the semi-automatic weapons to be sold. Well, to Joe Biden and senators and anybody who supports this, you don't allow anything. The whole idea of government being this entity who, like a king, that we have to beg for permission and you need a permit and a pardon. Yes, you can have this. We allow you to have this. No, this is a false memory. You remember the United States government being something that it never was and it never will. It's not based in reality. We allow you. The Constitution is a document of what? Of permissions. But not permissions of what the people can do. They're permissions of what the government can do. The Constitution clearly states that the rights derive from the Creator, and any power derives from the power that government has derives from the people. So the Constitution is a document of limitations and restrictions on government. And you swore an oath to the Constitution, which makes you a liar and a thief, right? To Joe Biden and every president. I didn't even swear an oath to the Constitution, so I don't even have to abide by that. But because in the end, the Constitution is just a document, just written down on a piece of paper that has no intrinsic value at all, no inherent value. Just like anything Joe Biden tweets, it's just words. It's just words on a blank background. It has no inherent value at all. But the Constitution outlines and underlines that government derives its rights from the people, right? And I know my Polish people think that this is like a real bold idea, and the rest of the world who doesn't have guns thinks it's a crazy concept. That when it's like a real American thing where they'll go up to a public official or a cop and say, you can't tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me. I pay you. I'm the boss of you. And they think that's arrogant, and they think that's real low class, and and that's really looked down upon by the rest of the world. But it's really true. It's based in truth. It's the people knowing their inherent value and being inherently sensing instinctively their sovereignty and self-determination. But let me say this: even the revolutionary, libertarian, limited government from the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence of the original founders of America, even they were too conservative, too orthodox, and too fundamental. Because now you see, 250 years later, you got Biden and you got Feinstein weaseling their way in, convincing people with their rhetoric that they have the right to take away, convincing them that they have a right to tear down the very document they swore to uphold. So what else needs to be said? I'll say this: a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Remember that. That's a beautiful sentence right there. I'm glad they wrote it down. And no, it doesn't need to be. The truth doesn't need to defend itself, but sometimes it needs to speak up. So I'm very glad that's in there. But his last sentence, he said, secure the safety of our children, our communities, and our nation. Joe Biden said that. The best way to do that, to secure the safety of our children, our communities, and our nation, is more knowledge and being aware of your natural law rights and acting in a moral capacity based on those rights, meaning treating everyone with dignity and respect. That's morality under natural law. That's being respectful of everybody else's property and not harming them, right? I talked about the immorality of taxes, the immorality of drug laws, the immorality of gun control. The reason those things are immoral is because they are against natural law, because under natural law, every person has the rights to their private property, starting with their body. My body, my property. That's number one. And then everything else you possess that you rightfully acquired. So if anybody that has any kind of weapon, even if it's a very destructive, dangerous weapon, even, natural law isn't pretty. There's room for chaos, but chaos is a teacher, and we're supposed to learn from chaos. And instead, we've got state-sponsored chaos. We've got government-approved chaos. These gun control laws. You've got totalitarian, dehumanizing chaos. It's cattle going to the slaughter. Soon enough, it'll happen. And acting in a moral capacity based on those rights is treating everyone with dignity and respect, violating no one else's property. That's what I do. That's what I teach. That's what I try to do. So for every week of tyranny there is, and there will be another one next week, we're going to put out a year of truth, love, and freedom. We are going to kill them with kindness. That's a cliche, but that's what we'll do. Because we are not the violent ones. We are not the violent ones, and it's unfortunate that at a time of tragedy, I have to take a hard position, and I have to put emotions to the side. I have to put my compassion to the side. And that's very unfortunate, because we are not the ones who are insensitive. We are not the ones who are trying to use other people's tragedy to advance our agenda. We don't have an agenda. We want to be free of other people's agendas, right? Thank you very much for your time. Have a great week. I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
You either vote for the mumps or the measles. Whether you vote for the lesser of two evils, you vote for evil. Politics and God are not equal, but the education to get on God is really lethal. People have more respect for a holy book than they do for a cow.